Can you guys all hear me out there? We have a microphone here. Good, good. Okay. All right. Wonderful. I'm glad to see some members from different audiences here among us tonight. We've got some academic folks, some undergraduates, some faculty, and so I'm glad to see that because Kent's story is the type of story that crosses boundaries that involves sports, culture, race, politics, history. So I think that this is the right audience for this story. Kent first contacted me back in spring of 2020 when he was looking for a publisher for his memoir. He shared his story with me back then, and I was immediately fascinated by it because his story is in many ways the opposite of what we think about as the commonsensical, Cold War situation. Everything that we think about, the Iron Curtain and the impermeability of the boundaries, in a sense, is turned on its head in Kent's story. Here's a guy who, at the height of Poland's most tumultuous moment in post-war history, the height of the Solidarity movement and subsequent martial law, the onset of the intensification of the Cold War in Reagan's America. So someone at the height of that moment who is able to travel back and forth freely. Kent was recruited in 1979 into the Polish top league to play professional ball. He began playing with KS Start, the Lublin team, and then switched to the Zagłębia team in Sosnowiec in your third season there, I believe. Yes. Third season. And so here's a guy who, at the height of the Cold War, is representing American sports, American culture, Black American culture to a Polish audience. Even more, here's a guy, an American, who's living, working, loving in Poland, who has become Polish without ceasing at the same time to be a Black American in New York during his summer time. So I was fascinated by the duality of these two simultaneous sort of identities or stories that were defining Kent's life. In any case, his story brought home to me the inadequacy of the metaphor, the Iron Curtain, as an impermeable boundary. We've got to think of it more as I don't know what to think of it as, a fence, a chain link fence with gates in it, gateways for special people, maybe, special people at the right time in the right place, who can come and go and be ambassadors and inspirers to different audiences inside of the interstices of the folds of the Cold War. Since 2020, Kent has gone on to publish his memoir, which we have with us tonight here, Kentomania, a term that needs no translation, Kentomania, a black basketball virtuoso in communist Poland. It just came out in February, I believe. We had talked about having an event before this, but I really wanted to bring Kent to Columbia in person so that we get a chance to talk with him and interact with him live. So here we are 2 years later after our first contact, finally able to get a chance to talk. We have the memoir in hand now. It's come out in fragments in Polish as well. Kent will be here hopefully to maybe sign some copies. Absolutely. If folks hang around for after that. And so let's welcome Kent Washington to our event here.
Dziękuję bardzo. That means thank you.
Yeah, it means thank you. Kent is also available to speak Polish with select audience members after the event too. Kent, I want to get into the nitty-gritty of your time in Poland in just a moment. So the story of your first visit to Poland, your impressions, the first time that you played ball there. But I want to start with sort of a big picture perspective by looking at two things that you say in your memoir, two quotes. At the outset, you write, at the age of 24, I was open to understanding and assimilating into a new culture, a culture that was looked upon as a threat where I lived, but one I had to embrace. I often heard the phrase, you knew what you're getting into when you signed up for it. I now know that it did not apply in my circumstance. I could never have known what I was getting into because I was the first. And then I want to jump to something that you conclude the book with. You write, being first always carries a responsibility that one may not understand during the journey. It is only when the journey ends that a legacy begins to reveal itself publicly. And so I wonder if you could comment on that, on the way in which you experienced these events, this experience, your story in two ways. One, as a young person, sort of entering a foreign country, a foreign culture, in many ways a taboo culture, a communist culture, but then also sort of developing as a person, as a player, but now also looking back at it from the perspective of so much that has gone by, personal history, political history, obviously, doubtless the history of the sport as well. How do those two perspectives inform the way that you look on who you are today and what you experienced?
Yeah, wow. When I went to Poland in 1979, I was going as a basketball player. My passion to play just drove me. I was obsessive about the practices, and I just wanted to play ball. I didn't care where. The fact that it was in Poland, I was there before 1976 with my college, Southampton College. So I knew that the basketball part would be okay because the audience, they liked me a lot. The cultural part, I didn't know because I was only there for like 2 weeks. So I was driven to just go there to play basketball. I had no insight on the communist part. I didn't really understand what that meant, really. You know, in school, read about communism, Russia, and things like that, but they're just words, they're just concepts. You really can't feel it. So when I got there, I realized that it's a little old. It was like I went back in time. The clothing, the fashions, appliances, and things like that. It was like I was way back in time, but the people were wonderful. So I just was there to play ball. When I reflect on it, I see that it was more than just that. I was actually a representative of America. I didn't realize it then. I was just playing ball. I really didn't care what they thought, as long as they liked me playing basketball. But after, I realized through somebody that spoke to me that I was actually a pioneer of sorts. And I reflected on it and said, wow, when you're the first, you really don't realize what it means until you're actually finished doing it. And in the book, I kind of reference Jackie Robinson to an extent where I'm in his shadow, where when you're the first, you are forging a way for others unknowingly, you know, but I'm not quite Jackie Robinson, but I was the right player at the right time for that. I had the right, I guess, temperament to endure the communist challenges of that lifestyle.
Wonderful, fantastic. We want to get more into those challenges, and you described them so richly in the book. Let me also ask you sort of one more big picture question. Ken, basketball, your relation to it, the way you describe it in the book is fascinating. Obviously, you're a professional player, so it's a part of your life. It's going to be a part of your life. It's something you do and you do well. But you write about it in other terms as well. You talk about it occasionally as a passion, a calling, but also as a mode of expression, a place that sort of you got whenever you had to think through things. I think you just now used the word obsession too, because you write about it also as a sort of an obsession, you know, the guy who was the first one at practice every time. And you even use the word addiction at one point and talk about the way that it, acquired a sort of a life of its own and became something that almost sort of ruled you rather than you ruling basketball. Could you talk about that aspect of the sport in your life?
Yes, at a young age, around 13, I realized that I was a little bit different than my friends. You know, I started playing basketball in the bedroom. I had a paper hoop, a sock, and I used to play in the bedroom, and basketball began to just take over my thoughts. I would constantly think about practicing basketball, what I could do to become a better basketball player, and it just took over. And I stammered then, still do now, but very badly. And I think in some ways that basketball was the way I could communicate rather than talking, because I didn't speak much in class, never answered the telephone. So I think basketball was my way of expressing myself. And I practiced passionately, obsessively. I pretty much had an unhealthy relationship with basketball as far as that. However, that drive and that passion, I think, built my character so that I could endure Polish lifestyle. And that was oddly enough. I didn't realize again, I'm 13, 14, 15, but the way I was alone and worked really allowed me to be alone in Poland as well, because the language barrier, there's not much you can really do. So that passion came in handy. However, I was addicted to basketball.
Yeah, and there's even a chapter where you write so eloquently about the solitude of the court sometimes,
Solitude is bliss.
which didn't prevent you from being a team player and
No,
setting up a whole sort of new model of team play with your first coach in Lublin. Okay, wonderful, Kent. Let's go back to 1976. It's May 1976. You're a junior in Southampton College, and I guess it's the Polish community of Long Island that set up a tour of your college.
Southampton Township.
Southampton Township, okay. And so you ended up in Poland on an exhibition tour playing ball. Some of the richest parts of the memoir are your first encounters with Polish culture, the contrasts, the look of the country, your first time in an airplane, your first time in a foreign country, but then also your first time with audiences too. And so take us back to that moment of May 1976, your impressions and the feelings that sort of first tour and the encounter with the court, with the over enthusiastic audiences for the sport, awakened in you. Yeah,
coming to Warsaw with my teammates, just driving from the airport to the hotel, just looking out the window, I knew I wasn't in America, that's for sure. The gray concrete buildings, apartment buildings, they were so gray and dingy and dull. The storefronts, very boring. They were the same thing, gray, dingy. The people's clothing, unfashionable clothes, stripes with plaids with polka dots, just all kind of things like that. And the mass transit, there were a lot of buses, trams. It was just different looking. And but what I loved was playing basketball there. Those audiences were fantastic. I have a very imaginative way of playing basketball. Some would say here, fancy, hot dog. I don't like those terms because it was inside of me. I played this kind of imaginative way, and the audiences just loved it. The oohs and the ahs and the Washington, those things. And after games, signing autographs or something new, because in college, we didn't play in front of many people. But playing here, people coming after games, autographs, articles, my picture, and we had the translators there. Ava, who was always with me, she would translate every single article of how great I was. And I got to feel a little bit uncomfortable because my teammates were there, and she's reading these articles to me, and a lot about me. And I'm like, this is a team sport, this is not really good. But she kept reading them and I was a little bit embarrassed about it. But we played Warsaw 3 games and it went well. Then we went to Lublin and that place was great. I could actually get kurczaki frytki, chicken and French fries. I was in absolute heaven. Love that. And we played in front of tremendous crowds there. That's a tremendous basketball town. And I played very, very well. And I was very happy with the way I played. And I began to realize, maybe this is a new normal now, scoring this amount of points and playing in this manner. Maybe I've hit this new normal that I didn't really realize I knew, but it was a combination of their rules. Back then, Federation of International Basketball, FIBA, the FIBA, the rules were vastly different than the American rules, vastly different. I described them in the book. And the speed of play helped me, helped my instincts, helped my ball handling, and I had to take more shots because there was a 30-second shot clock. And in America, back when I played, no shot clock. So the game became different and I loved it. Fans loved me. And before we left, the coach of KS Start asked me would I want to come back and play there. And I was like, well, I gotta finish college. I can't, my parents would kill me if I stayed there to play. So I always knew that, well, I'm good enough to play in Europe. And that was something that I was very thankful for and very grateful for, that I could play somewhere else.
Yeah, wonderful. And comes across so richly in the memoir is the first encounter with your style in the Polish fans. And I want to say more about that in just a second, and the whole idea of Kentomania. So you're in Poland in '76, you play some games there, you encounter, I guess for the first time, as you said, fan culture, and you're signing autographs and so forth in this strange place of contrast, as you pointed out. But then you come back to finish college. You thought about trying out for the Lakers, or you tried out for the Lakers.
I tried out for the Lakers.
And
unsuccessfully.
Unsuccessfully, okay, but you were there and tried out. But you had Poland in mind, and so that's so remarkable that as a college junior, the coach of the Polish team, that was Zdzisław Niedziela, who offers you a chance to play professional ball.
Yes.
So then in 1978, after you finished college, you decided to take him up on that.
Yes.
And how did that work out? You had to.
I had to telegram him.
Telegram him. Okay.
I had to telegram him first, and we corresponded with Telegram. That's how old I am. And we decided on a salary in Zloty, plane ticket.
With no agent, by the way.
No agent. Had to do all this by myself. What agent is going to represent you going to Poland? So I left January 4th, 1979, and my birthday is January 10th. And my mother's like, "You're not going to stay for your birthday." I said, "Look, I got to go play basketball. Like, this is important." And I get there, and there's this tremendous snowstorm, and I get picked up by a translator, Wojtek Kopilek. He became a friend that was so needed there. Zdzisław Niedziela, the coach, and Stanisław Majdan, my great friend. And we drove to a Warsaw restaurant, and my first meal was beef tartare. If anybody knows what beef tartare is, it's a raw hamburger meat with egg yolk and a lot of different things around. And I asked Wojtek immediately, "Can they fry this into a hamburger? Because I can't eat this." And they all laughed at me like, "Stupid American, you know." So I got something to eat, and we went to Lublin, and that started a great career there. And I will say that the coach, he is a genius to me. He's the fact that he took a chance with me to bring my style of play into a communist basketball team was very tricky. A lot could have gone wrong, a lot of things. I may not have liked it. The players may not have liked me, the culture, the rules. There could have been so many things that could have gone wrong, but he stuck with it. I stuck with it, and I think we go down together now as kind of revolutionizing Polish basketball, which is really interesting. But great time in London.
Yeah, you write a lot about how Niedziela sort of built the team around your style, and that's one of the most wonderful parts of the memoir. I think some of the most gripping sections are the synergy between you, Niedziela, and the Polish audiences, because you're all pushing each other.
Yeah.
On the one hand, the audience is coming to see you, and so then you're discovering yourself as a basketball player, but also as a showman, essentially.
Yeah.
And then Niedziela is digging your showmanship, and then especially the no look throw and everything that you were doing, and you write about how the Poles had to get used to that, and you throwing the ball at them without you looking, and they're like, oh wait, the ball's coming to me. So in any case, that synergy is so wonderful there. Talk about that a little bit, about how you came into your own as a player, and you talked about your imaginative style, how you I guess learned to play for the audience while at the same time playing professional ball and being the team captain.
We had when I came, we had a 2-week break. The national team had a break there, so they were out playing. So we had like 6 days before the team starts playing again, and 3 days before our first scrimmage. So I'm practicing with them the first night there, early morning practice. We practice like twice a day. It's a pro team. Everybody gets paid. And the first practice is a lot of shooting, weight training, things like that. The second practice, we're actually scrimmaging. And I'm throwing passes to these guys, and it's going through their hands. They're not looking. It's like whizzing by their faces. And coach says, stop, stop, stop. And he explains to them in Polish, of course, the translator's there, and he explains to them, we brought Kenny here to play his style. You guys have to adapt. I don't want him to change. You have to watch the ball and adapt. And I was kind of relieved that he didn't blame me and say, you know what, you can't pass like that anymore. He did the opposite. And it worked. Guys started to keep their eyes open. We had some conversations. One time I dribbled the ball all the way up court, and I passed late to one of our players named Zbigniew Wiśniak. And he yelled at me, in Polish, we can play too, he said. And he was right. I should have passed the ball earlier. So we talked about it, and after in the locker room, I actually thanked him and said, you know what, thanks, because I need to know what you guys think. And we had a really good team. The crowds were 3,000 strong. I don't know, there's no fire rules there that you can't have. I mean, the place is ridiculously crowded. So many people there that steam is all over the windows because it was ridiculous. All on the sidelines. There's no room for the referees to run, and the noise level is just deafening. I mean, we'll keep playing. The refs they're blowing the whistle, holding up their hands. Stop, stop, stop. And the crowd has this Czerwony chant. That was team colors. red and black. It was charitable and charming. They would clap and stomp their feet 3 times. And that was just an adrenaline rush that I never had before. And it was great. Our team was so cohesive because these guys were such brilliant, instinctive basketball players that in my book, I make sure to not have the reader think that I'm the basketball missionary going over showing these Polish players how like basketball is really played. It wasn't that at all. They showed me how basketball is really played. The ball moves, the body moves. And I was like, I like this. This is basketball. This is real instinctive, cohesive basketball. Whereas nobody's talking to each other. We're just playing. And they taught me much more than I could ever teach them. But my style, they received well. And we all started to really play this unified game that Coach Nigella wanted us to play. And it worked. I mean, crowds of, I couldn't believe the crowds. I came to the scrimmage game. It was a scrimmage game. They said after that 8,000 people came and 3,000 could actually get in. And I walked by this line of people, I mean, I don't know. And that was a scrimmage game. The next day, our general manager says, we're going to have to rethink ticket sales because we almost had a riot out there, So I didn't realize, I thought they always got big crowds. I didn't know. And then we would travel to different cities and crowds of people, just crowds. And we started to draw people that weren't basketball fans, but wanted to see me play. So there was this, I call it the Tiger Woods effect, where when Tiger plays, people that don't even like golf watch golf because Tiger's playing. And that kind of happened there, and I was like, wow, I didn't know, but it was great.
That's the Kentomania.
The Kentomania
effect is Kentomania in Poland.
That's what it is. A journalist told my translator that this is Kentomania. These are people coming that don't know basketball but want to see it now, and it's just creating ticket scalping and all kind of stuff. And
the success was volatile in a sense, in that after 2 seasons, your team had become so. Matter of fact, you took them in your first season to the playoffs. You guys were down 7th out of a 10-team league, and you took them to the playoffs in your first season, second season as well. Mm-hmm. Bronze medal in the first 2 seasons. But by then, your team had gotten so good that all of you guys now had more opportunities. Yeah. And so you came back in season 3. It turned out that the team had been halved because everybody had signed lucrative contracts with different teams. Even Coach Nigella had moved on.
Yeah. So with success comes a lot of turmoil. So the first 2 seasons we were bronze medalists. We were packed houses. 3rd season, I come back after being home, come back there. Starting guard was gone, our coach was gone, our center was gone, and one of our forwards retired. They all got better contracts elsewhere. And I'm like, uh-oh, this is going to be tough now. And it was. We had a reserve starting, and we weren't the same team anymore. Our crowds kept coming, but we weren't the same team, and we actually fell down to the 2nd league. That's when I had to look for another team.
And you switched then to
I went to Zangwembe Sosnowiec.
Okay, all right.
A very young and wealthy and upcoming team. Yeah.
And you finished out your career there with them.
I finished out my career there with them, and that's when all of the martial law and solidarity comes in.
Yeah, let's if we could, let's talk about that a little bit. you mentioned that, going over there seemed kind of abstract, communist country, Russia, Eastern Bloc, Iron Curtain, these are all abstract things that you've heard in school. It hasn't been a real place. And you didn't necessarily think about that when you're over there, because for you, it was team, community, daily life. You write that and also you were at this time also seeing a Polish girl, you had a Polish girlfriend. Both of you were sort of apolitical, so focused on sports. But then then martial law is declared in 1981. And that's a fascinating chapter in the book too, because suddenly I'm thinking about this sort of split here. In 78, you're trying out for the Lakers. In 81, you're Polish, and you're living in a Polish apartment in Sosnowiec. You're living a Polish life. You've got to pinch pennies. You've got coupons. Everything is rationed. You've got to stand in line. The entire country has to obey a curfew. You were living Polish life. And what was that like? Martial law there, and that no longer was foreigner playing ball in the country. That was living Polish life. Yeah, I was living Polish life. So by my third year, I could speak Polish. I spoke grammatically horribly, but I could speak Polish. And Bożena and I moved to Sosnowiec, and we were living the Polish lifestyle. I can speak Polish, going out, buying food, doing things. She's a heptathlonist, and she trained somewhere, I trained somewhere, and then out of nowhere, it seems like, well, we heard whispers of things going on up in Gdańsk, the shipyards closing down, and Zangwemi was a coal mining sponsored club. So we started to also hear through my teammates that the coal miners were going to strike soon. And my neighbors, I could read the papers, Bożena knew that this was trickling down from Gdańsk to the bigger cities that people were going to start to strike. And there was a regime switch. General Jaruzelski took over and declared martial law. They postponed games, but we could still practice. Curfew was at 8 o'clock. The universities couldn't go to school anymore. You could basically just work and go home. And they gave out rationing cards, for all kind of items. Now, I made a lot of money. I had 35,000 zloty per month, which is like ridiculous amount of money there. However, there's nothing to buy. The stores are empty, nothing to buy. So what Jaruzelski did was he was punishing the people and removing items so that Lech Wałęsa and that crew would kind of stop what they were doing, but it had hit too hard. Everybody was involved now. So what I did was my club helped me with my kurczak, with my chicken, and we stood in line and got things we needed. Bożena was very good finding out where things were and lines were long. If you saw a line, you just kind of stood on it because you knew it was for something. And you just asked, well, what's this for? Well, flour's coming on, sugar. So you just stand on line. But I would take my alcohol and my cigarette coupons and I would trade them for chicken because I didn't smoke or drink, but everybody else does, So we made out quite well, but it was definitely, I realized that communism could give it and take it away. And I never felt that in Lublin at all. I was just living life. And all of a sudden I said, wow, this is communism. This is harsh. And but people
were so resilient, so clever. If I had flour and I had too much, I would find somebody that had sugar and we would exchange. There was a lot of like bartering going on because money meant nothing. So there was a lot of that, but there was something called zawakato. That means fixing, arranging. And that was what everyone did. They fixed it.
Yeah.
They arranged it.
Yeah. Załatwić. That's a great Polish verb. Polish language students out there. Załatwić. Take care of it. Take care of things. Take care of business.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Those are great stories. Kent, I want to ask you, I want to change the topic here a little bit. You write in the memoir that, in Poland, you're wearing multiple hats. You're the first American, but you're also the first Black American to play ball behind the Iron Curtain. And in a sense, you're representing American culture, but also Black American culture. That was also an element of your legend as a player. And you speak very positively about your experiences as a Black man in Poland. And you don't talk, or you write that you didn't encounter, racial prejudice or instances of racism or anything sort of major at a daily level. Nevertheless, you begin the memoir with an early encounter, or at least it's early here, a chapter with which you quote from a newspaper article. I am not Kunta Kinte.
Yeah.
And so this is something that I guess it was the opposite team had been watching Roots and wanted to upset you a little bit or upset your team. And so, but I also found it to be quite remarkable that that is a statement. I am not Kunta Kinte, and this sort of establishment of an identity as a Black player in Poland. Talk about that a little bit, about being the Black basketball player in white Poland at the time.
Yeah, well, when we were there with my college, kids were like fascinated. Like they were touching our hair and our skin and everything like that. When I went back in '79, of course, many people had never seen a Black person before, but they were curious, not racist. And, you get the occasional drunk that says something, something. But when Wojtek would say, this is Kenny Washington. That's Kenny Washington. And then everything changed, So I went from being that to, oh, that's Kenny Washington. So my daily life was never any kind of racism at all. I mean, just a joint here or there. The Kunta Kinte incident, we were in Warsaw playing Legia Warszawa. And I didn't know that Roots was being shown in Poland. So we're warming up and, they have their Legia chants. Every team's got their chants and they're chanting and we're warming up and then out of nowhere, Kunta Kinte, Kunta Kinte. And the whole audience is saying Kunta Kinte. And I'm laying the ball up and I'm like, oh, am I actually hearing what I think I'm hearing? And my teammates were like looking at me like, uh-oh, how's this gonna go? And I realized that they're trying to get me off my game. I didn't take it racially at all. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to show them an exhibition of basketball they've never seen to quiet this crowd down. And I played the game, and as soon as the game's over, they all come running out. They want autographs. So I'm signing autographs, and I signed just a couple, Kunta Kinte, just to kind of, get the joke back. I wonder if anybody still has those autographs over there. But that was a defining moment for me that they used that term it wasn't racial at all. I didn't face much racism at all. And later on, I've read articles that Black players there are racially insulted all the time. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, what? I mean, it showed me that communism, the people's enemy was the state, not me, the state. But once you become democratic, then you can choose your enemy, in a different class. And that's kind of unfortunate what democracy brought to them and what communism was more non-racial, I guess, because I never felt it. There was one time a guy, in dinner with the translator, and he comes over and Wojtek's there, and he comes over and he says, "Who's this Negro?" And Wojtek says, "It's Kenny Washington." And the guy goes, "Who?" He goes, "He plays basketball for KF Stadluga." Guy says, "He's too small to play basketball. Just come to a game and watch." And the guy shakes my hand and says, "I'll be at the next game," basically. He comes to the game. But, the term Mujin there was Negro, and that's what they used all the time. And I wasn't insulted by it,
Solidarity. Right?
Yes.
So, against the state. Yeah, nice. Wonderful. Ken, I want to ask you a question that is kind of hinted at in your memoir here, but that you don't go into as much. You write at one point, "I started feeling Polish. I became Polish," and you even, give an interview saying, "I was Polish. I felt Polish.
Yes.
You were welcomed, and it became a part of you." You write that you became who you are as an adult, and you write actually that your time in Poland was the most important time in your life.
Most important time in my life.
And but then you left, and you write towards the closer of your memoir that you went to Sweden. You had spoken with a Swedish coach in Germany, I suppose, when you were playing Western Europe, and also struck by the way that you were seen as part of the Polish team by the West Europeans. You go to Western Europe, and the Germans are like, "You're speaking Polish, and you're with the Polish team. You're clearly from that part of the." Matter of fact, you even slip in a few times. I don't even know if it's subliminal or not. You're like us and we, and
I felt Polish.
and also that sort of pride of being from that side of the Iron Curtain too. But then you say something towards the end. Ultimately, your move to Sweden was motivated by a cultural shift, and I can't remember exactly how you say it, but you say something like it wasn't in the end my type of life. Sweden was a lot more, well, what was it exactly? I mean, you don't write about Sweden in here, and you played ball in Sweden for what, at least another 4 seasons, right?
I kind of summarized Sweden.
You summarize a little bit, yeah. But not with that sort of, that fun detail and the synergy and the.
It's the historic part of the book is Poland.
It's Poland, yeah.
Sweden's not historic.
Yeah.
Just my wife is only.
Yes, that part is historic. But so what were your feelings as you were thinking about staying, about leaving? Was it martial law? Was it the economic situation? Was it just the toughness, the dreariness of life, or was it just the sort of desire to see another place and experience another culture? Why did you leave?
So in Poland, I definitely felt Polish. There was a time there that we were traveling to West Germany to play in this big tournament. And we were traveling through East Germany, and we got stopped at the border, and the East German police, they got us out of the bus while they inspect the bus. And we're outside talking, the teammates and I say there that I didn't even realize that I was American. I'm talking with my Polish friends. We're outside the bus talking, smoking and talking while the guys are looking about. And I'm not even thinking that, there could be a problem because I'm American. Because I felt Polish. I identified as a Pole. So we get back on, and they're handing the passports back, and I don't get mine. So I say, wait, where's my passport? So the general manager, he goes and he asks the police for the passport, and they, yeah, okay, you know, here. And that was the first time I realized that I'm American. You know, my passport is actually valuable to them. You know, and I didn't really realize that. I probably didn't then either. I'm kind of reflecting on it now, but I identified so much as Polish when we left Poland to go to France or to go to the former Yugoslavia or the Czechoslovakia, that I didn't realize that. I didn't realize it sounds bizarre, but I didn't identify as American. I identified as Polish because I spoke Polish. I hung out with them all the time. So when we're in West Germany, I'm playing against the Russian national team, the West German national team, and the Swedish national team, our Polish club team. And I play well. My imaginative style again wakes up a few people. And a player on Sweden wanted me to play with his team in Sweden. So I was torn, you know. My coach, my Polish coach was like, he was not happy because he saw that I was attracting a lot of attention from a German club too. So I told Chris, the guy that, the Swedish guy, that I think about it now, you know, I'll see. So I get home, talk to Bojana about it, you know, she realizes that Sweden is it's a better opportunity, hard currency wise. And it's a better lifestyle. It just is. So like, I'm really torn because I like Poland. I like the club, but I realize that Polish zloty don't go very far and Swedish crown do. And the Swedish lifestyle is just better. It's more American, it's better. So I went and played ball in Sweden. And it was a difficult decision, but one I had to make at that time. And I had no regrets because it was time to probably change then. I was in Poland for 5 years, you know, back and forth, and I pretty much basketball-wise did everything I could do there. And it was kind of time to just move on. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. Let me just ask you one final question before we open it up to the audience and the online questions. Have you been back at all? Have you thought about going back? Would you like to go back?
Absolutely. I have not been back to Poland since I went to Sweden. And in Sweden, I played ball there 10 seasons and I lived there for 14 years. I have a Swedish passport. My wife's Swedish, of course. My daughter, who's 30, she's also Swedish. And I haven't been back, but I'm going to go back in the summer of 2023 for sure.
Nice.
My daughter's a softball player, or was, and we played in the Czech Republic 3 years ago, maybe or so, 3, 4, 5 years ago. Yeah, and when I went back there, I had tears in my eyes because it had changed so much. I couldn't get over the fact that the Czech Republic didn't look like Czechoslovakia. And I just, you know, H&M, McDonald's, I'm not going, what the heck happened to the Czechoslovakia? It's the Czech Republic. And I feel as though I'm going to have that same emotion when I get to Sweden, that I'm going to be really teary-eyed just thinking that, I remember Poland at its best under communism, which is a weird thing to say, but that's the Poland I know and actually love.
Yeah, you might be able to find some sections of Lublin or Sosnowiec that are still going to take you back, but be ready for those tears when you get back.
I am.
The way it looks now, that's for sure. Wonderful, fantastic. I want to open it up for questions, but let's hear it for Kent Washington. So, if folks have some questions, let's pose them to Kent here, and we already have one question online, which I'll start off with maybe. Here's a question from Magdalena Betkowska. Betkowska, I guess it would be. Kent, she has two questions, she says. Number one, I was born and raised in Sosnowiec, and I am so proud to hear that you live there. Do you remember what street was your apartment?
I do not. I'm so sorry. It was an apartment building. We lived high on the floor, but I do not know. I know it was a couple of blocks from the sport hall because I walked there. But the only address I know is in Lublin, where I live with Babcia Kowalska, Siemiratskiego 60. But I do not know what street, and that's embarrassing. I do not know.
Okay, check that for the history books.
Yeah.
Second part of Magdalena's question. After martial law was implemented, were you a subject of questioning or investigation by the government as a U.S. citizen? And I might even add to that, from the U.S. side, were you approached at all for information on what was going on the other side upon return to the U.S.?
No, that is the biggest mystery in my life, that during martial law, I was never contacted by any U.S. diplomat. I don't know why. I just lived there, and I was never contacted. And on the Polish side, I wasn't contacted. And on the American side, when I came home, I was never contacted about anything. And I always wonder why.
They could have, you were a gold mine of information. You could have told them so much, they missed their opportunity to find out what was going on in martial law Poland from the perspective of someone who lived there. Yeah, that is. Yeah, I wonder what that is. That is a fascinating thing to think about. Was it the sports, or was it maybe the contract that you had that allowed you to go back and forth? It was, yeah, that's a really interesting thing. That's one of the interesting parts of the story.
That is, I'm still trying to find that out.
Yeah. Dziękuję bardzo, says Magdalena. Questions from the audience? Any questions? Yes.
Kind of about you coming back home, it's like, how did it feel when you first returned to America? Did you have a reverse culture shock, or what questions were people asking you? Like, what were you telling?
My first summer home, it's in the book. My father's first thing was, "You need a haircut." It's like the first thing he said, "You need a haircut," because I couldn't get my haircut over there. But no culture shock. About nothing. I was appreciative of my mother's well-rounded meals, because there, not a lot of vegetables, not a lot of fruit. It was a lot of meat and potatoes. So I kind of appreciated that. As far as questions, I kept my professional basketball life very quiet. In the beginning of the book, I tell why. I think the preface. I have a lot of friends that were top players, NBA players, top players. So I always thought I was this second-class basketball kind of like citizen. So I didn't say much about it. My friends knew I played in Europe. They thought that no one knew the impact I had on Polish basketball and even like Swedish basketball. It was quite similar until this book was written. So I have friends that are reading it now going, "I didn't know you did this and that," because I never talked about it. When they asked me things, I would say, "Yeah, it's cool." I'm not the person that talks about how good they're doing or not. Because if you're going to talk about how good you're doing, why don't you talk about how good you're not doing? You know what I mean? So I don't bring up either. So did I answer your question? Okay,
You talk about the sort of the double life being the sort of
yes,
virtuoso in Poland, but
Yes.
then you were playing all-star basketball in the region in the summers here, where you
yes.
were just one among many players who were rising to the top. And so it was
Yeah, I played in the Rucker Park tournaments, all these famed tournaments here, and I was just another guard, you know. There, I was this like star, you know, so I knew my place in both places, you know, and I never got them confused.
a couple of questions over here. Let's go with Michael back there first. Yeah.
Yeah, before martial law, were you monitored by officials in any way? And was your translator brought on by the team, or did the translator possibly have contact with officials?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I've never been asked that question before. Was I monitored? I probably wouldn't know if I was. So I can't answer that. All I can say is I never felt restricted or limited to where I could go. Never. So I don't know if one of my teammates, a manager, you know, was a so-called spy. Had no idea. My translator was an Orbis translator. Orbis is this big company over there at the time. And he was also a professor at one of the schools, I think Białej Podlaska, for a while. So he was hired on as a translator, and he also did like tour guides. And I'm pretty sure that Wojtek, the language he used, the way he carried himself, was not a official of the state, because he was pretty wild. I mean, you know, unless he was very good at disguising himself, because he told me things that I don't think an official of the state would tell. You know, things. One time he was buying me like towels, and we went into a store, and a pretty limited amount of towels and the kinds of things you could buy. So I was asking him, why are there only one type of like stereo? It was like a Unitron, stereo, TVs, everything, and one type of this, one type. He said, Kenny, everything is regulated here. This is communism. He says, store hours are regulated. The amount of money people make. If you don't sell a thing, you have a job in that store. It doesn't matter. So he was telling me all these things about communism regulations that I don't know if an official would tell, because they were pretty negative, you know? So
Unless he was trying to draw you out.
Unless he did switch teams and translated for another team the year after. I had gotten a new translator. He went to Zangwendi my second year because another guy came over. So did I answer your question the best I could?
Yes,
That also reminds me of the parts in the book where you talk about how the basketball players got you involved in the black market.
Yes. Well,
Where everybody was involved in it.
everybody. I mean, the black market, when we went over as college players, the mayor in Southampton said, don't mess with the black market. Don't sell any money. Don't, that is an offense. You'll get thrown in jail. But the first thing we did was we traded with the black market because the money was so good, you know. We got kids from like New York, like, what are we gonna do? We're gonna exchange with the black market. And that's the first thing we did. Our coaches were doing it too, you know. So it's kind of, and then I made my money. I made at my first team, I was making 20,000 zloty per month. I think the average salary in Poland was like 3,000 zloty a month. And with incentive bonuses, 8 games per month, we were getting incentive bonuses per game, per player, between 3,500 and 1,000 zloty. So I could make as much bonus money as my salary. So I would make 30,000 zloty easily. And I would accumulate all of this money. And then my teammates, one of them wanted to buy a car, and he had Deutsche Mark. So he exchanged his Deutsche Mark for Polish zloty, because he needed zloty to buy his car. So I made zloty. Then I would buy gold bracelets, 18 karat gold bracelets, and I would bring them home here and I would sell. So I got through customs. One time I tell in the book, I'm walking through customs with a sword and a hatchet because I had won them in this basketball tournament. And in my baggage, I got crystal vases and all of these awards and all this stuff. So I'm going through, they open the bag up and they're going through all of this crystal vase, and they call another guy over and they're talking. So I went, wait, I spoke a teeny bit of Polish. So I went, wait. I took out my, the clipbook and showed them. They were Washington, Koshakufka. I went, yeah. I start signing orders. Everybody's coming over. I'm signing autographs and everything. There's all this chaos. I walked through there with gold bracelets up my arm, Deutsche Marks, and the two swords and hatchets through the airport. Like, that won't happen now with a sword and hatchet. But it was just, that's how I made my money. I traded the zloty for the Deutsche Marks or the gold. I didn't have to do that coming from Sweden.
Part of life there. There were some questions over here in front. Yeah, okay, go ahead, Dave.
What was your daily routine like during the season?
So
Question is, what was the daily routine like during the basketball season?
that's what. So when I lived with Babcia Kowalska, breakfast, kielbasa, bread, tea. Took the bus into town, took about 10 minutes or so, practice with the team. I'm always there first, of course, because I have to practice by myself. Then the team comes in. Practice like 90 minutes, go home, eat kielbasa, eat lunch, rest. And around, we had a 5 o'clock practice, go back into town, 5 o'clock. Our second practice was at the place we actually play the games. First practice was at our club, which is a little bit small. Practice there, finished practice around 7, walked up to the Hotel Victoria, my favorite place, and had a kurczaki fritki and Coca-Cola. I never had a cold Coca-Cola when I was there. They're always warm. And after that, took the bus home. That was that. To learn Polish, I turned my radio on to a talking station and just left it on all night to kind of subliminally learn language. But that was my daily routine every day. And my translator sometime would take me somewhere else for like lunch, But basically, if you don't speak the language, you're kind of like, you're like isolated. And TV, no source of entertainment, They did have Kojak, but it was voiced over in Polish. I don't know if any of you got to Google Kojak. It's this old kind of cop show. But so it was, my favorite show was called Stuka Maya. It was a cartoon with this phenomenal theme song, just phenomenal. And I love that, but that was my routine. I look forward to playing games, but day in, day out, that's what I did.
Yeah, question?
Yeah. You were saying earlier about how the translator would read these articles praising you in the locker room. Did you ever feel any resentment from your teammates from that?
Well, that was college. I didn't feel any. My college teammates interestingly enough, were really behind me because one thing that they knew, I worked hard. You know, they saw me all through my freshman, sophomore year. So I was the hardest worker during college. I was insanely possessed in college. Hence, I had to go one more year of college because I didn't finish on time. But coming from high school to college, I found out that the gym was always open in college. So that was like, forget about it. But my teammates in college were never envious or any kind of animosity. In Poland now, there was an article written in 2020, later on, where they interviewed Zbigniew Biszek, my guard who played with me, the same guard who actually yelled at me during practice. And he coaches now. They asked him, and I read the article, I like Google translated it. Were any of Stark Lublin's teammates envy Ken? And but Biszek said no. We loved him because the crowds came and we got more incentive bonus money. What's there not to like, he said. And I thought that was interesting because you never know what people think about you. Teammates, coach, you just don't know, you know. But when he said that, that made me feel good. But I never felt anything anyway. Those guys loved me and I loved them. Because we traveled on like buses and trains as a team all the time. We were always with each other. You got 2 practices a day. That's 4 hours with each other. Well, in the sauna, I could talk about the sauna. I never went to a sauna ever. These guys live in the sauna after. And I thought they were trying to kill me, actually. I was dehydrated, I was ready, and they're playing cards in there, in the sauna. But they were trying to teach me a lesson like, are you with us or are you not? And I built up stamina to keep coming back, you know, but that was their kind of initiation, you know, is this guy really a teammate, you know? And so no animosity, I didn't feel it.
I like one of the stories you tell is how your coach from college actually came over at one point to help coach the national team,
the Olympic national team.
And he was having some culture shock, and you had to step up there and say, "Hey, this is the way it's done over here, huh?" It's, you became the native informant over there, basically.
I was invited to the Olympic national team in 1980, a camp up in, I think it was Zakopane, for 1 week. And they thought so much of my skill that they invited my college coach over. Of course, they thought he taught me my skill. So Coach Lezak comes over there and they do different things. We climb ski slopes and where we do things that are non-basketball, and he wasn't used to it. He fell in mud and got his thing, and he was really not happy there. You know, so I had to tell him that things are done differently here. And you have to understand that it's not just basketball. Like sometimes we would play like soccer for the warm-up. And I never played soccer. I'm horrible at it. And these guys are 6'8", 6'7", and they got like nimble feet. They're playing soccer and I'm totally lost. But I play anyway because I'm part of the team. And I told Coach, you know, this is kind of how it is. So he kind of got through it, you know. But, you know, there could have been a lot of firsts. I may have been the first American to actually go to a communist national team camp. I may have been the first American to be in a communist movie. I was in a movie over there. So there's a lot of firsts that I'm kind of realizing now that, you know. Yeah.
I think one of them that you don't mention is that you were the first to not only go over there, but also keep coming back too.
That's for
After, you
sure.
know, after you played, there are a couple other guys here where they only stayed for one season or a half a season,
Yeah.
but you know, so that's another first there. I think there was a question back here, wasn't there? Yeah, question here, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all this. A lot of really fascinating stuff.
Thank you.
You know, I appreciated that, you know, when you were talking about the sort of style of play, you know, before the game, things like that. You know, rather than making it a story about, you know, you go over there and show them how it's done, you know, being a basketball missionary, how, you know, you have a lot to offer them, but also, you know, you go over there and you realize, oh, you know, these guys can play. My coach sort of knows what he's doing, right? It's sort of adaptable in this way. And I guess I was curious whether you got a sense of sort of like how they learned the game or sort of what, you know, how they had come to sort of reach that level, right? Because, you know, whether this was something, you know, were they on like youth teams in the club or sort of the state athletic system? Was it more sort of a, you know, playground thing, right? Because that would be maybe different than like, you know, when you were going back home, the guys you're playing with there would have came up, learned the game a different way, you know?
Yeah.
So did you get a sense of that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The club I played for was a pro team, and our farm team were high school, college age. So I never saw any below that youth, but I would speculate and say that our youth guys who were 18, 19, 20, they practiced with our pro team like twice a week. They were allowed, and they could move up and down in their league and up to ours if needed. I think that I don't know, I've always heard that the communist way of finding like athletes is very specific. I don't know how true that is. Like if I saw some fencers there too. I never saw any gymnasts. We had a track and field team. So I don't know at a youth level, like 12, 13, 14, how is it your interest that starts it off, or do they actually say, he's tall, come to basketball, or, you know, he's tall, volleyball, or she's this, that. I'm not sure. But I will say that when they find talent, they exploit that talent. You are doing that, you know? So our training sessions were vastly different than the US here, because I never lifted weights before. That was taboo back in my day. Basketball players don't lift weights because you wind up getting these tight muscles and you can't shoot. Not there. Our shooting practice was also our weight training practice. So we would weight train and then shoot so many shots that you felt smooth. And I never did that before. I never really lifted weights like that before, and did circuit training, plyometric training. All of these things were new to me. I come back home here years like later, and all of these people are doing plyometric and making like money do. I said, we were doing this in 1980, you know, with vests on, jumping over hurdles and all of that stuff then. So I really can't answer your question to say that the basketball players there, those guys that played, were really good, and they trained twice a day. And they trained hard, really hard. There were some, I would say there were two players at that time, if allowed, could probably play in the NBA. When we played the Russian national team, their whole team could have played. I played against Arvydas Sabonis. I don't know how many of you can actually Google him. He came over here to play with Portland when he was really done. When he was 18, 19, he was a phenom. Their whole team was just unbelievable. Detlef Schrempf was playing with the West German national team. Of course, they're a democratic country. He played college here, but the Russian national team, they weren't allowed to leave Russia. But that whole team could have easily played over here. Yeah, man, they were phenomenal. So once they find you, you train hard, you know. And they train skill too, very skilled training. Did I answer your question? I'm not.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, because that was a tough one.
Was there a question over here? Yeah, first.
Thank you so much. This is really eye-opening and using at the same time. I have a question. You mentioned that while you were playing in Poland, you had a chance to go to West Germany. You also ended up playing to Sweden, but you went to other communist countries as well, like Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
And I'm interested.
Yugoslavia wasn't communist. I have to stop you there. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, that's actually what I'm interested in, to hear more about how these experiences, I guess they were limited, but as limited as they were, how these experiences were for you to compare these different communist or not countries, to compare it to Poland. Did you maybe have a chance at least basketball, what kind of basketball was played in these countries and what was the difference or similarity?
I was in, I think it was Belgrade playing. I was in France, but of course, they're not communist. I was in the Czech Republic in Ostrava playing, trying to think, and West Europe. So the communist countries you play against, they all play the same type of ball. It's body move, ball moves, unlike here. Back in the New York Knicks, way back, it was a little more team play, but there is such different rules too, that it changes the game. The traveling here is not traveling there. There's something here now called the Euro step that's new here. That was there all the time. It used to be traveling here. They globalized it and legalized it here. So I would be playing there and I would stand for a charge and the player would step around me and score. But here they couldn't do that. So, and there's these different rules. The 3-second line is a trapezoid. When there's a violation like traveling, you could take the ball, run out of bounds to the sideline and just throw it in. The referee doesn't even touch it. So it changes the game to where the European teams, especially these teams, just have this different style of handoffs. Their big men shoot the ball way better than our big men did. Our big men now do shoot it better, but did. It was such a different game, but they all played it. The Czechs played it, the Yugoslavians played it, the Russians played it. Everybody played that same type of game. The thing was, the Yugoslavians were much better. They had Drazen Petrovic and all of these guys. I mean, they were just tremendous players. The Russians, tremendous talent. I mean, look how big Russia was. The Soviet Union was then. I mean, all of these countries was the Soviet Union. So they picked 15 players from, like now, each country has their own national team. That's really good. So imagine being a Soviet player who's really, really good, but you're not as good as these 15. They probably had 100 players. I mean, easily, that could go to a camp. And the Yugoslavians too, they were just jam-packed with players. So they all played that same game. Very efficient, great shooters, phenomenal shooting men. No three-point line back then either. That was new. So these guys were scoring points like 30 and 40 points with no 3-point line. You know, so it was different. Did I answer? Okay, because
Sounds like
sometimes
we
I'm not
need
sure.
somebody to write the history of East European basketball,
It-
the evolution of the sport and the, you know, the different strategies and the
I tell you,
team origins, team building.
the biggest compliment I ever got was the Russian national team coach, Gomelski, telling me I was a good player. I was like, what? You know, I mean, you know, this guy coaches the Russian national team. And he said, hey, Washington, he's still yelling down the hall, you're a good player. I went, wow, you know, that's great. Gomelski, he's like a legendary coach. I guess, I think somebody else.
Is there another question here? Yeah.
Yeah, do you think, are you satisfied with how it ended in the Olympic team, or do you think you're robbed of like full potential?
I was not satisfied how it ended. When I came back and my center was gone and the guard and the coach was gone, I was devastated. You know, if we could have kept that team, we had young players who were really coming up, who needed time to supplement that team. We would have been top 3 for years then, because these guys could really play, but our juniors weren't ready yet. We had 2 6'8" kids that were really good, but not on that level right then, you know. And I was devastated because I knew that myself and Irene Shmulak, who was the national team forward for us, we couldn't hold that team up. It's just, the other teams are just too good. You know, you can't have 2 players hold them up. So I was devastated. I thought I was gonna stay there for a long time. Love that city.
Yeah, question back here.
Yeah, I was interested in when you mentioned
It's hard to hear.
sorry, I was interested in how you're talking about the difference in being in communist countries and not having that issue of race be as prominent. When you went to Sweden and then like when you returned to the Czech Republic after it had transitioned from communism to democracy, did you feel that those came with an increase in racist events or racism, if you feel comfortable speaking to that?
I didn't hear everything. Something about coming back.
About you visited the Czech Republic
Yes.
Later on, and you mentioned about how it was all different, and going back to
Yeah.
your comments about a lack of racism under communism, but then under democracy, sort of hate, prejudice can be channeled in different ways. Am I getting the question right? If you on that return visit,
the Czech
experience,
Republic.
to the Czech Republic, if you saw any different in.
Well, I was there
different
for a totally different reason. My daughter played softball. So I was just observing a bunch of softball games. And when my wife and I went out to eat or something at a pizzeria or something like that, the fact that I could speak Polish, the Czechs loved. So they loved me. You know, I would say, "Dzień dobry," and I would like talk because they're very close, the Czech and Polish, very close. So they were like, "Oh, he speaks Polish, like this is great." So they didn't even see me as black when I was there. They saw me as a black guy that spoke Polish, like this is great. So, but I can't compare because I lived in Poland. I just kind of visited the Czech public at that time. You know, so I really can't answer that question as far as race. Sorry about that.
Any other questions? Okay, Jan? Yeah.
What's your favorite European player in the NBA right now?
Well, I like European players in general because they're very skilled. A favorite, I think my favorite, and it's not because of his physical prowess, it's because of his attitude. Giannis, because he has in him what I had. I want to get better at any cost. I don't want to change teams. I want to get better and make this team better. And that's what he has that I see. I don't know him, but that's the demeanor he transfers out, that I want to get better at this sport. That's my favorite player to watch.
Okay, I think we'll wrap it up here, and Kent is still here if folks want to come up and ask follow-up questions. And I think we have some books available for signing as well. And so, okay, wonderful. We have, I guess, complimentary copies of the book that can be picked up. And Kent, if you wouldn't mind autographing.
Absolutely.
For some interested audience members, let's hear it for Kent Washington. Thanks so much.